realizing is that there's a miracle to be stewarded here. Is that means all the pieces are still on the board. And if all the pieces are still on the board, that means there's still time. And if there's still time, there's hope. And hope, I believe, is a factor of time. The end of hope is the end of time. Like, we can still fight this. We can still fight this, this story of destruction that we're fed every day, that we tell ourselves for some pathological reason.
This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Tidal Influence, a Californian ecological consulting firm who proudly supports environmental education and all of the diverse conservation efforts that Pelicanus works to highlight. Visit their website at tidalinfluence.com to learn more about what they do to conserve our coastal resources and how you can get involved. In this episode of Conservation Conversations, we continue our mini-series, Conservation on Fire. We talk with the award-winning and best-selling author and artist, Obi Kaufmann. Obi Kaufmann has authored 6 books that present the magic that is the network of living systems in California in the most beautiful way. His latest work, The State of Fire: Why California Burns, confronts one of California's most pressing social and ecological challenges while sharing a deepened love for the natural world and a refreshingly hopeful vision of California's future. So please enjoy our conversation with Obi. Obi, thank you so much for joining us. We can't tell you how excited we are to talk to you. We're such big fans. So please, if you want to give yourself a quick introduction, tell us who you are and what you do, and we can go from there.
Oh, Austin Taylor, I've been such big fans of your work as well for many years now. We've been acquaintances, and to be on this great podcast in this as part of your Conservation on Fire mini series that you've been producing with such to be in the company of such great thinkers on this what probably is the most important matter on the land, if you will, facing California in this century. To be included in that portfolio of fantastic thinkers is just an incredible honor. And yeah, I am here as an auteur, as one from the outside who might have a different, maybe even heretical stance on so many of these core issues related to fire as a student of ecology. My name is Obi Kaufmann. I invented this genre in 2017 called the Field Atlas. The Field Atlas is something that doesn't exist. It's like something between a road atlas and a field guide, if you will. But I'm not really concerned with like the where of things, which is what atlases tend to be historically concerned with. I'm more concerned with the how of things. The systems theory is really where my core proficiency, my core competency lays. It's in analyzing and synthesizing these domains of ecology and aesthetics and complexity theory across the landscape, and in terms of ecological services rendered, that these big books write themselves. And so in the past, I've come up with 4 real thick field atlases that are like 600 pages a piece, and I'm a painter. I've spent many decades sort of like chasing the idea of the well-rendered eagle wing or snail shell in watercolor on paper, right? As a backpacker, giving this back to the thing that I love the most in the universe, which is the more than human world of California. I use this idea of bridging the world of science and the world of art to form this better story, not to make this better argument. And these books are bestsellers. I'm very happy to report, and I give that all back to this electric citizenry of California that is ready for a new narrative, in the 21st century, where we can actually think about what the 22nd century is going to look like, in terms of policy, in terms of community, in terms of all that. So I hope that I position myself on the front lines of some popular discourse that hopes to alter the course of the consumerist ship that wishes to exploit without reciprocation the vectors uh, of the deleterious factors, if you will, that perpetuate this media narrative of how the ship might be crashing. Okay, so how do we change that course? How do we avert that iceberg? These are the things that keep me up at night.
Where I kind of wanted to start is, and Taylor, rein me in and turn us in the right direction if we want to, because I feel like we could go in 1,000 different directions here. But
Yeah, I just gave you 1,000 different directions for sure. I understand that this is about fire, right? You guys want to talk about fire. My new book is called The State of Fire, Why California Burns. It's a thin book, right? Here's a copy of it. It's only 200 pages, and there's a very specific reason why it's a thin book, right? For this massive topic. And we, that's probably a good place to start too, Austin. But please don't feel reined in by anything.
yeah,
Get sparked.
no, yeah, oh, for sure. And so I would definitely want to talk about the Fire book. I'm really excited to get it and read it, but we can't move past the trilogy and the California Field Atlas here. So we're California natives. We grew up out in the desert in Palm Springs. We took all of our vacations in the Central Coast because it was 40 degrees cooler and it's just a little bit nicer for a few weeks. And, especially being in Southern California, you're within an hour of a mountain.
Yep.
You can get up to the Angeles or Big Bear or whatever. And, even in Palm Springs, you could just take the tram and you're at the top of you're at 10,000 feet in maybe an hour. So we were distinctly aware of the diversity of California, of topographical diversity, habitat diversity. And so having these books has been really, I don't know, you grow up and you realize you see this stuff, but then having someone like you who has that skill to write it out and then paint it, and you're like, oh my God, this is what I love about California. Like there's all this stuff that is, good and bad about California, but this is what I love about it. And so, people on camera can see it. You guys probably can't because everything's compressed, but we've got the deserts of California, the coast of California, and the forests of California. Also have the State of Water, which is, like I said, another of your thin books. And they're, like you said, they're atlas. And like I said, there have been formative in us really understanding and appreciating the state we live in, and really helping us do what we do, with Taylor with Sierra Nevada Alliance, and myself doing whatever I've done all over Southern California. So I don't even know what the question is, but I just want to say thank you. We love these books, and we can talk about your process. And I guess that's my first question: is what made you think, what, I got to make a 600-page book for each the desert, the mountains, and the coast of California?
Yeah, that's not the way I go about it. It's these books tend to write themselves. Why a book at all, right? That's kind of an interesting question. Like in the 21st century, what role does the book have to play? Well, books historically have a very integral role across the 20th century for really setting a navigational course for all of American society towards these conservationist ends. Like I don't believe that the golden age of environmental legislation, which really happened between like 1970 and like 1975, probably started with 64 with the Wilderness Act. But we've got Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. We can thank this book for the reason why there are bald eagles in California right now, or osprey, or any numbers of birds of prey. And or you can go back to like Sand County Almanac, which is really like the thing that sparked so much of this land ethic movement. Like when Aldo Leopold wrote in the 30s, when he said, if it is good for the land, then it is good. This is a land ethic, right? This is you take care of the land, you take care of the people, right? And you take care of the people, you take care of the land. And that kind of like North Star is the kind of thing that gets me up out of bed in the morning, right? Where if I can just give all of me to this every day, something will matriculate, something will will finally present itself as some sort of deliverable. And the book itself is such a fine sort of user interface, even in the days of endless apps ad nauseum. There's nothing like to be able to flip through the book, and my books are set up, as an atlas, in the sense that they have no sort of beginning, middle, and end. That's not really the arc that they're designed around. They're geographic in nature. And now, one of the big books that influenced me as a young man, and less so as an older man, is The Mountains of California, John Muir, right? And so this is a strange stepchild in the sense. My books are called The Forests of California, The Deserts of California, The Coasts of California. These grand physiographic entities, really, that make this wonderful quilt that is the sort of arbitrary political shape that is the nation's third largest state by land area. But it's like John Muir had no idea what he was looking at, and I think that is really apparent in so many of his rashly held conclusions about ecological systems in California and how they've been maintained for centuries across the Holocene. And it's interesting for me to think about and to wrestle with the idea that my work will be shown to be as wrong as his work is 100 years from now, given like the advent of like artificial intelligence, for example. Give us more data. I think the AI revolution is going to transform the ecological sciences in ways that we can't imagine yet. As interdependency becomes more in focus, as we are collating just an amount of data that we're just like standing on the precipice of or we're standing on this trail towards this data mountain. I like that metaphor better, but like, so we've got, so I'm trying to translate all this through the eyes of an artist, right? So that's probably my core vocation. I mean, my dad was an astrophysicist. I grew up in Southern California too. My dad was the director of the Griffith Observatory, and Dr. Kaufmann's son was going to be a mathematician. And so I have way more training in math than I do in art, right? And my father would say things like, mathematics is the language of reality. And he's not wrong, and yet I have this thing, probably from this rebellious proclivity or whatever, that I carry around is like this idea, like, man, what about beauty? How does beauty interface with meaning to my life? And this is like sort of a whole half of like the great schools of human thought that lead to like the humanities, right? How do the humanities interface with ecology? And for me, the answer is this aesthetic realm of painting and transmission of what the well-rendered wildlife animistically captured to some arresting end might actually translate to personal well-being. So that's probably the best introduction I could give to the hows and whys of where this stuff comes from on a core psychological level.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people we talk to, their work also came out of that rebellious proclivity that you talked about. And I don't know if like recently Lenya Queen Davidson, same kind of thing. She just kind of grew up with a rebellious family, and you're like, you know what, we're not going to do that. And I think that kind of feeds us as well. And actually, there's a quote in your desert book, and if you don't mind, this will be kind of the last fanboy thing we do here.
Oh, but, please.
We grew up in the desert.
And I'm just going to stop you, Austin. Yeah. It's not going to be the last fanboy thing that we're going to do here. I'm going to spend the rest of the time fanboying out. But yeah, keep going.
You, brothers. Thank you.
So we grew up in Palm Springs, like I said, and especially like 6 months out of the year, you're like, I just want to play basketball. It's so hot. I can't go in the pool anymore. You're just like, I just want to be outside, but I can't. And so you kind of ended up hating it. And so when you leave, like I went to school in San Diego, and then you kind of come back, you kind of realize, for us, at least for me, realize, oh, why we like this place now, like why it is special. And so this might take about 60 seconds, but I'm going to read this little passage here that really encapsulates what I now feel about the desert. So, in your adventure through the material in this book, consider how you explore the trailless landscape of your own metaphorical wilderness. The deserts of California invite you to a deeper understanding of what it is to have a relationship to a place. It could be any place, but the discrete and unique quality of these lands and their lack of resemblance to any landscape type in California or across the world offer a special focus that may seem plain but is really quite mysterious. In an environment like the desert, there could be an almost spiritual aspect to the study of ecology and geography. Paradox rules the way the desert appears. The desert is as resilient as it can be fragile. The desert is as dangerous as it can be healing. And the desert is as violent as it can be peaceful. And this is my favorite, is what is in a word? Desert. Abandoned, desolate, without, left, bereft, so much implied lacked. A word from a language that is still adapting to a place where it did not originate. I love that line. That's my favorite. Imagine if we were to embrace that supposed emptiness, a false construct that does not or cannot acknowledge an endemic abundance, or if we were to entertain a stripped down vision of nature uncluttered by biomass and humidity and walk into the apparent void. If we did, we may find our return a different, stripped down, forever altered version of ourselves. So I reread these when we decided we were going to talk, and I just like went through and I found that, and I was just like, I just like, just stopped me. I was like, geez, like that's exactly how I now look at, a third to a half of the state. Just like how cool it is, and how we're just like, oh, there's nothing out there.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, the deserts are interesting. Everything beyond the Sierra Crest, outside of the California floristic province, we're dealing with a different world. I mean, when I wrote the deserts book, I just felt so overwhelmed by, I might as well be writing a book about Mars. Like it's so different than temperate California that it's just a completely different biome. And the Mojave especially is its own desert type. So it's its own sort of subspecies of ecological mosaic that warrants 1,000 books. The inventory the survey that I try to present is anemic from the start, and living with that failure of not being able to represent how biodiverse, how robust this world of the desert is, or any world that I represent. And two, how important every single piece is. And while we don't have exactly the data, we'll use that word again, we don't have the data to exactly trace the transverse property of that importance, say up to human well-being. Okay. We understand, we are gleaning enough to know that the architecture of the system is dependent upon every strut that each piece of biodiversity represents. And getting back to the biodiversity, I mean, so now I had to take on even this harder task, which is fire. So I did the deserts last year, and now fire comes out. I've been running a book about every 18 months or so. So I'm well, I mean, what else am I going to do with my life? And so so now I'm taking on fire. There's a reason why fire was my last book in this series, the sixth book in the series. Really, it's like fire is just like habitat spaces are wont to do. It's this culmination that finally requires this release, this energetic, this energetic release to maintain some sort of homeostatic parameter inside of my own self. In this longer journey of, as you just mentioned in that reading that you so eloquently did there, Austin, thank you for it. But it's like, it's this idea of, how do I be more from here? How do I be a Californian? My mom was born in California. I was born in Hollywood. And like, and yet I still feel like I'm colonizing myself. I still feel like I'm settling myself. I don't feel like I'm from here. And hey, there's no destination. It's not like, oh, I finally made it. It's like, this is a process that will take my whole life. I will die striving to get to this mindset of being Californian, and getting right with fire is probably the greatest challenge and opportunity towards those ends.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely want to talk about the rebelliousness. I want to talk about the amount we don't know in nature, in conservation. I want to talk about, still feel like I'm colonizing myself. I'm fascinated by that idea. And I definitely want to touch on your process more, specifically the audacity of the artist. I'm really curious about that. But I think we absolutely need to talk about this fire book, and we need to dig into it. And I get deserts, I get coasts, I get forests. Like, okay, that at least conceptually makes sense to me. But then when you created your State of Water book, that kind of like shook me a little bit. I was like, wait a second, what, the state of water? Okay, I only think about it legally, or I only think about it when droughts are coming out. And so then thinking of State of Fire. I'm really curious, and we're excited to get the book when it comes out. So I'm just so curious about your motivations behind it. I'm curious about what you just said. Getting right with fire is the greatest way to understand yourself as a Californian. Like, what does that mean to you? I'm really curious.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So the books were written and published in a very specific order. The State of Water, Understanding California's Most Precious Resource, is another thin little book. You can see that they're both sort of, State of Fire is a little bit thicker, but State of Water comes in under 200 pages. And the reason for that is, okay, it was my second book. I did the California Field Atlas, and that was arranged or organized really by these large matrices of living systems that include like earth, air, fire, and water, these sort of platonic systems, and how they're sort of biogeographically assembled around the state. And then I wanted to go forward with the California Lands Trilogy. I think you used the word trilogy, Austin, there. I use that word too. And the California Lands Trilogy is the forests, the coasts, and the deserts. I didn't want to do the mountains. That doesn't really make sense. And, that guy wrote that book already, as we talked about. But, so I wanted to divide, physiographically the state up into these different generalized sectors. And in order to do that, I had to figure out water. And that's why water was my second book. Water, the number one, the most altered aspect of natural resource topography in California is the waterscape of California. And there's 2 points that I'd like to make there. The first is that the amount of alteration that was involved in how we have transformed the way water flows in California, and to where it flows and from where it flows, rivals anything that humans have done with anything at any point in human history. It was such a massive infrastructural undertaking over the past 90 years that I believe that it rivals anything that we've done. I'll put it up against the pyramids or the Great Wall of China. Like, what do you want to do? Like the California Water Project, Department of Water and Power, the Bureau of Reclamation. Like, this is a monumental event in human history, really. And and it feeds to this day the fifth largest economy in the world. The largest city in America is Los Angeles, and it's over 100 miles from the nearest like viable water source. Like it's the greatest real estate scheme in the history of the planet. But at the same time, it's like we figured that out, and that is such a but that amount of work that's gone in over the last 90 years will only be rivaled by how it again transforms over the next 90 years. Okay. And so this is also great precedent, our ability to put in this kind of effort, this technological effort, is great precedent for what needs to happen with the firescape. Okay. So it's my contention in this new book that fire and the building of a new industry around fire that incorporates so many different economic disciplines, everything from artificial intelligence, which we started talking about, to healthcare, to mental health care, to landscape design. I mean, the real estate, it's not, you often talk about like forestry and that kind of thing, but I tell you guys, it's like, no, it's real estate. Real estate, $700 billion at the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface. This is the industry that needs to be to have fire front and center, and has the power to transform the infrastructure of the firescape. Okay, but that's getting into the weeds. I wanted to go back to the way that the books unfolded. Okay, so the second point of the state of water is that it's thin because we're very focused. It's only about storage, conveyance, and usage. Okay, so that I don't get into seniority rights and money. Like when you're talking about water in California, most of the time you're talking about money and or power. Political or otherwise. Now, I as a student of ecology, as a passionate student of ecology, want to know how the waterscape influences biodiversity now. Especially that was 5 years ago that I wrote State of Water, and now we are witnessing the largest dam removal in American history, with the removal of the 4 dams in the Upper Klamath River that represent the greatest survival chance of salmonid and anadromous fish populations in California. It's the best chance we've got here in the 21st century to meet as conditions in the Sacramento watershed continue to deteriorate given industrial interest. We have the Klamath River that is now coming back to life. And when you talk about the waterscape, you can't talk about the firescape without talking about the waterscape. You can't talk about all of these ecological systems because it's all tied together. It's all one big bow. It's all one big circle. It's the hoop of the horizon. And the thing is that there's thousands of years of precedent for human stewardship of the stuff. It's not like we don't have a map. The map is just here. Just ask the people who are still here, who have been here for thousands of years doing this, and so again, I'm pushing forward to a discussion of fire, but I get it into a lot of this sort of like gleaning these points with my third book, which was Forests of California. And as an artist, to get to your point there, Taylor, it's like as an artist, or your question about the audacity of the artist, I need that license and that shield to talk this way. As I mentioned, my father was an astrophysicist. My mother was a clinical psychologist. So I've got that sort of like weird brain recipe going on. But I'm very sensitive to what science is, it can be, and its limits. Okay. So I need the license and the shield in order to say things like, check this out. In California, trees are fire waiting to burn, right? That is a non-scientific statement, but it is true. I look at a forest that is one of these infirmed, overcrowded, drought-stressed, beetle-laden forests that are suffering under tremendous mortality, and I just, how can you not see fuel? How can you not see fire before it happens? I mean, you squint your eyes and you can see the orange and the smoke, and it's not even there yet, right? This is consciousness. This is human consciousness looking at, a subjectively at what it means to be here in this place. Okay, so getting that into your head, that trees are fire. Okay, trees are fire waiting to burn. That as a Californian, you need to understand this. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pull that punch. Like, there's fire is here, and it predated you and it will outdate you, and it's not going anywhere. We have to live with it, and living with it means learning how to be from here, and that is like the greatest challenge that I know.
And real quick, that was definitely a transition for me when I went from just being kind of like a biologist, ecologist to working on fires. Is you look out and you're like, oh, there's some chinkapin, there's some lodgepole pine and mountain mahogany, and then you talk to the fire guys and they're like, oh, that's ground fuel, that's ladder fuel, and that's this is a potential crown fire. And it's just a different way to look at it, and you're like, oh, okay. And so then you kind of have to make that decision, is like, do you want to, quote, destroy it by trying to stop the fire, or do you want to let it be destroyed by letting it burn? And so it was like trying to like manage those priorities there, I guess. And so I guess my question is, so you talked about kind of why you needed to write the fire book, but and without having read it yet, what is the fire book? What is it that you're trying to get across by writing this book?
Right. Well. Okay. So that I think your point about language and how we identify beings in our ecology, okay, is a very interesting one, and as the one who is so bent towards ecological sciences as I am, it's like I struggle with this language. I struggle with the language of even the word nature, even the word wilderness. Wilderness is such a problematic word. Wilderness is I spent so much of my adult life reveling in the works of Wallace Stegner, who was really responsible for pushing through the 1964 Federal Wilderness Act with his famous Geography of Hope essay that Congress received, that manifested in the untrammeled language of this monumental piece of legislation. And yet we're going to have to address that again. We're going to have to address that again as Californians and as Americans, because it might be a perpetuation of injustice using this language. And so that leads into what this book is. Okay, this book is I hope, just in my water book, that I kept the scope very specific. I'm keeping the scope very specific in this fire book. Okay, that one. There are two stories to be balanced. One is a very old story. I sort of gleaned that, right? That fire in California has been stewarded by the human hand for at least 15,000 years, at least through the Holocene, at least since the last glacial maximum. We've got a number of things that have happened, especially in the past 6,000 years. I think it comes as a remarkable point of interest that, in fact, the modern configuration of California's forests biogeographically aren't much older than the Great Pyramids. California looked much different 6,000 years ago, before the San Francisco Bay, before the advent of this incredibly diverse indigenous culture across the California floristic province that have set up all of these what have been called biodiverse economies, or pyrodiverse economies is even a better word. I think that's probably Stephen Pine said that one. Pyrodiverse economies, where you have, well, you have to remember there's more tribes in California than there are in the rest of the North American continent, save Mexico, and there's more languages. And this has to do, and you have fire to thank for that. Fire in the eschewing of seed and till agriculture in the history of California. It's not that indigenous Californians didn't know that. It's not like there's some sort of cultural ladder. What a lie that is from Babylon and throughout Western civilization, that there's some sort of staircase of ascendancy towards agriculture and technology. It's like, no. There was a conscious eschewing of that technology towards this pyrogenic, adaptive biome that existed and exists potentially again inside of this regime of nutrient delivery that fire affords, and that is a revelation. It's a very old story, but there's also this very new story academically, and I know that your podcast is often focused on this story, which is the emergence of fire ecology, and its divorce from, say, traditional academics of silviculture and forestry, and agriculture. How do we grow trees for timber products? How do we transform trees? Here's, how does the word transform to tree to this other word that's timber, right? Timber would be the commodity. Timber would be the economic factor. And so this is this very new story, and which is a fascinating story, which is also related to why. Here's another word from Stephen Pine, our nation's greatest fire historian, when he says the Pyrocene, right? The age of fire, which is really the last 25 years or so, which is also a core focus of my book, or Anthropocene fire, right? This modern thing that fire is, this potentially monstrous thing that causes so much trauma. I talk about the ecological game so much that I really don't want to, let go of the human end of things. This is really traumatic stuff. Fires are scary, and there's no way that fire is not going to be scary. But the book itself is not really about so exactly what do we do now? Where do we go? We've got our best minds working on that. The subtitle of the book is Why California Burns. So I trace the ecological history of California climate, California arboreal habitats, California biodiversity in this sort of digestible space. So bouncing those two stories, the old story and the new story, are then met with another big conclusion in this book, which is fire in California doesn't even happen because of trees. Fire in California happens because of people and the decisions that people do or do not make. And this has been true. This has been true in this entire geologic age that is the Holocene. And to acknowledge that we're at the center of the story, we're not adjacent to the story, is core to getting right with this thing. And I use the word we a lot when we're talking. We is a word that I have expunged completely from the book. We is a word that is political in nature, and it recognizes some sort of agenda that is not objective. It's not terribly democratic either. We can be very exclusive. Which are the we are talking about here, especially in terms of fire? Are we talking from Cal Fire practitioner point of view? Are we talking academic point of view? Are we talking tribal sovereignty? Are we talking about Sacramento? Are we talking about the urban sector? Who is the we involved in the discussion of fire, right? So I don't use the word we at all in the book. So as again, Taylor, to your point, as being an artist, I have to do this as from an individual perspective. I'm not here to tell the Indian story either. That's not my story to tell, right? I got my story to tell, and keeping in those parameters. I mean, it's my own defensible space, to borrow, some of the nomenclature, right? I have to keep my zone trimmed, pruned, weeded, and this is the quality of my voice that I'm present, because if I step out of line, I'm going to burn up too. My whole system is going to collapse. My voice must be razor thin and very tight. Otherwise I'm just talking nonsense, and I really, wake up screaming in the middle of the night thinking that that's what I'm doing.
Love the idea of taking the idea of defensible space and putting into your own life and your own mission and your own writing and everything. That's so great. So one thing you said there was fire is never not scary. And just in this last few days, we've had the bridge fire, the line fire, and the airport fire in Southern California just kind of go from a couple acres, 100 acres to 50,000, 30,000, 20-something thousand in 36 hours, 72 hours. And it is scary and it's awful. At the same time, I'm sitting at my place in Long Beach and I can see all three plumes, and you can't help but be impressed by the magnitude of it, where before you just see a skyline, and now you see these 10,000 foot plumes that are getting cut off by the atmosphere, pyrocumulus. And there's something about it, and maybe there's something wrong with me, but there's something about it that you just have to appreciate, that this is a natural thing. And I don't even know how to think about it, because it is hard, because there's so much destruction, but it is part of the natural process. Obviously, there's a lot of political, and like you said, there's things that go behind why there are mega fires rather than 1,000-acre fire, 500-acre fire consistently. But there is something about it that draws people to it, and so I've been seeing on social media and everything, people have been so enamored by it and saddened by it, but also it's like a car crash, you can't look away. So I find that relationship with fire very interesting, and especially like you said in the WUI, there's definitely people might lose their homes, and there's certain areas where I think there were some structures lost, but for the most part, it's 10, 20, 30,000 acres of just forest that may not affect me as someone who lives at the beach.
Yep. Well, that's interesting, Austin. I mean, again, I couldn't identify more with what you're saying. I recognize those emotions in my own heart. Where we get tripped up, though, is your use of the word natural. Is it a natural process? We have so deformed fire in this state over the past 100 years, certainly since the Big Burn, since Gifford Pinchot, since we had these ideas. A U.S. Forest Service, the director of the U.S. Forest Service, Gifford Pinchot, the first one, he said he was trained in forestry in France, and he really believed that science on the time prescribed that if you get rid of fire enough, it will go away. Like that was cutting edge science at the beginning of the 20th century, and that was such a tragedy of misconception. I think that's a chapter in my book. And now I'm like looking for the natural in the Anthropocene. And a couple of years ago, I was the artist in residence for the National Park Service at the Whiskeytown National Recreation Area, and this was 5 years after the Carr Fire. And the Carr Fire, whipped through it whipped through the suburbs of Redding. A fire tornado formed that was half mile wide, 3 miles high, and 2,000 degrees. And at that temperature, flashover occurs, and that means that houses get vaporized in less than 5 minutes. There's nothing left. Your stove is gone. Your porcelain tub is gone. There's nothing left but a cement slab after that. in 5 minutes. This energy release is equivalent to atomic weaponry, and that kind of like megatonnage that or kilotonnage really we're talking about here on the landscape is really not a death sentence, but it does for it, it's not. It's not a death sentence. See, that's the thing. This is an anthropogenic landscape. I mean, you go up to Whiskeytown now, and the reservoir is human made. The deformation of what would you call it? The percentage fire return interval departure, right? Which is the amount of fire on the land, either a glut or a drought, depending on which part of California. And if you're in Northern California, it's probably a drought of fire. But you're in Southern California, and you have these chaparral fires, which are always crown fires 100% of the time, and you just get too much fire, and the land can't recover. And the land can't recover for a number of reasons. One, of course, it's decisions that people made, but you also think about like missing biotic factors. As we recognize the cascading effects of all of this biodiversity, we recognize that it might not be resiliency that we're after, but it's adaptivity, especially in the wake of so much anthropogenic climate breakdown by way of global. So yeah, I look out at those fire plumes and I think this is amazing, and I also think this is human doing.
Obi, that was amazing, man. Just like such a, it's more than poetic. Like you write poetically, you speak poetically, but it's more than poetic. There's something to be said that, like you said, like science is focused on truth, but like beauty is like focused on helping us conceptualize it. It's like it's that doors, that access. As you were talking, it made me think of resiliency, and Taleb's book is, I have a lot of troubles with that concept of resiliency, and maybe it is adaptivity, but I love Taleb's book is anti-fragility. Like, so what we might even be seeking is not resiliency, but rather like something that grows when it gets wounded, something that like a muscle that's it actually expands and grows, and it's anti-fragile. And I really love that concept. And as we're thinking through, the article that just came out last week was we have more wolves in California now than we've had in 100 years, because they just had these, 30 pups born this year.
Taylor, yeah, I was just painting wolves last night. I'm sort of like thinking about talking with you guys this morning, and I was painting some wolves, realizing now we have 65 wolves in the state, and although we have like every single one of our landscape types in California is endangered, or critically endangered, or at least threatened. We've got a very low extinction rate in the state. It's actually less than 1%, all being said and told. And this number might go up with the advent of artificial intelligence and the ability to collate all of these numbers. But as we're realizing is that there's a miracle to be stewarded here. Is that means all the pieces are still on the board. And if all the pieces are still on the board, that means there's still time. And if there's still time, there's hope. And hope, I believe, is a factor of time. The end of hope is the end of time. Like, we can still fight this. We can still fight this, this story of destruction that we're fed every day, that we tell ourselves for some pathological reason, that there is no time, that it's already passed, right? So there's at least as much hope. There's a point for every point of despair. There's a point of hope. I guess that's what and I can go all day long talking about points of hope, because they're everywhere. And the work that you two gentlemen are doing is evidence of that.
You just laid out a perfect, I don't want to say factual, but like factual reason for why hope should exist in California, if not elsewhere. And so I guess my question with that is, how do you get to that point in with yourself to we talk about this. We kind of joke. We're like, sometimes, although we love our jobs and we love what we do, we're kind of like, it's still, sometimes it's a Wednesday morning and you're like, I still got 3 days to go to the weekend. I really just want to, I just really want to relax. So when it comes to that for you, like, what is it that kind of keeps you going? Where does you find that hope for yourself to share the messages and then, share that larger message of hope you just talked about?
Yeah. Thank you, Austin. I mean, I tell you, it's like, gosh, in the 80s when I was backpacking as a teenager, learning how to backpack, like this was Ventana Wilderness, before the Soberanes fire, before the Dolan fire, but I'm talking about the mountains outside of Big Sur on the coast, and they have always known lots and lots of fire up there. In fact, it's one of the great vectors of speciation for so many conifers, for so many different types of living relationships. And yet in the 80s, I had this distinct sense that nature was something that I missed. Like, it's all going down from here, and there were no condors, there were no tule elk, there were no otters, there were no whales, there were no white-tailed American kites, there were no peregrine falcons. I mean, the list goes on and on, and yet every single one of those species that I just mentioned, populations are booming. And you can go to see a herd of 5,000 tule elk. It's a bummer when you don't see a condor hiking the High Peaks Trail in Pinnacles National Park now. When and that was 40 years ago. And it's like, since then, with good love, with good science, with good practical policy, we have seen such a resurgence across the landscape, but also inside of our own hearts, as to what's possible. And this is democratically represented in, like, say, the grand $1 billion initiatives from Sacramento over the past 20 years that have led to an entire industry of watershed restoration, for example, and for fish habitat, billions of dollars that were passed by the citizenry to get this stuff done. And I foresee a massive governmental influx into this new fire story that we're working on developing right now here today in this conversation that us three are having, right? This new fire story where it's like, we have to welcome fire. We have to welcome fire. We have to welcome fire as a function of being Californians. It's part of the deal. It's part of the relationship that comes with being Californian, is that you have a personal relationship with fire. John Valiant, in his prescient book Fire Weather that came out a couple of years ago, it takes one case study in Canada, but his application is universal. And when she says, the wildland urban interface now is everywhere, and that I believe is a call to. It's a call to being forewarned is being forearmed. Okay, like let's get to work. We're Californians. Like, we check out what we've done. Check out the precedent of what has already happened, and we begin to triangulate a heading through all of these perilous bottlenecks that seem to surround us on all sides. And in fact, as so often is the case, it seems like popular discourse, we're like our own worst enemy in so many regards, when 100% of what you hear on the nightly news is destructive regarding fires. 100%. There is never a story where, like, oh, hey, we had a low severity fire. It's like, or for example, like how about this? So I'm up in Whiskeytown a couple of years ago, 5 years after the Carr fire. There's 3 species of wildfire that are new to science that were discovered there. like brand new species. Species that are found elsewhere in California, but they have since but because of their isolation, they exhibit mildly different properties. So it's like we know kind of what this is, but this is new. The car fire is as devastating as it was to the human ecology momentarily, is now yielding this, turning out to be this nutritive vector on the land that is as regenerative as it was initially destructive. Okay, so this energetic release, this freeing up of resources, this opening of niche possibilities on the landscape is what we're talking about here. So yes, it's awesome, it's fearful, but it's also very creative, and it's like the striking of the anvil or something. We're making this new tool. This is all within our purview. This is all within our capacity to understand, this opening up of this greater adaptivity to what it might be. Here's a thought that I'd really like to sort of kick this idea of home, square in its butt. Here we go. It's like we here in 2024 can conceive of a California more integrated, more connected, more biodiverse at the end of the 21st century, even given the advent of climate breakdown by way of anthropogenic global warming, even at the end, even with all of those stress factors that are coming on the horizon, we can conceive of a California at the end of the 21st century in better shape than we left it at the end of the 20th century. And that's it. Like that. And when I say that's it, I mean, it's in the power of the human hand, the human heart, and the human mind to do so. And I think it can come about democratically as well. So these are this is the hill I'm going to die on. This is the solutions are here. Like, it's very complicated. It's very complex, but those are two different things. I understand that complicated is much different than complex, but the point is that there's a navigable trail towards that heading.
Oh, we could talk for hours. I really feel like if we could just keep going and going and going, I would love to just keep talking.
Well, thank you, Austin. It's like I really feel good about how you have welcomed me into this greater conversation about fire, and I'm so proud of the work you're doing with your mini series here at Conservation on Fire. And now I'm going on book tour. So book comes out next week, and so you can go to @CoyoteThunder, which is my Instagram handle. And I hope to be coming to a community near you. And if I'm not, send me a note, and I can get my ass up there, and we'll figure something out.
Thank you again to Obi for taking the time to talk with us. Now please do yourself a favor and follow him on social media @CoyoteThunder and purchase his new book, The State of Fire: Why California Burns. But we also recommend looking into the rest of his work, as they are all amazing. Hosts and producers are Austin Parker and Taylor Parker. Music was provided by Picture Book Studios. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to help. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next time.